exchange that I had with them. Because I think somebody.
Oh yeah, the YouTube. Yeah, everyone's talking about that. Those YouTube videos.
Yeah. So I've just Terminus just seems like a troll, and he's dumb anyway. And PKD I used to think that guy was. And PKD I used to think that guy was like reasonable. That I now think he's just too dumb to talk to. Explain to them what the issue is, right? Because my point is that if I say I think it's okay to eat cows, and I don't think it's okay to eat humans, right? And it's not in virtue of anything, right? There's no inconsistency there.
Okay.
And if
yeah.
they demand,
Okay, can you guys?
yeah, if they demand a further justification, right? They're just not understanding what's being said, right? Because to say it's and particularly if they're granting, right? The key point is they're granting that there are irreducible values, right? They're not taking an infinitist or coherentist view, right? They're granting that at some point reasons can bottom out. So it doesn't make sense to ask, right, in virtue of what do you actually hold that value, right? If in virtue of what is asked, right, why would the cause be in any way relevant, since the cause isn't what justifies having the reason, right? That's just sort of like some illicit demand for a reduction of a value to some non-normative fact, right? Now, I mean, the way Levi explained it to me, because I can't be bothered to listen to Isaac, you know, and people like that talk about this topic. I hate name the tree. But what he explained to me was that it just seemed to me that they were saying something like this, like that it was implausible that there could be norms that are underdetermined by non-normative facts, right? But like, I don't really care what they think is plausible, right? So do they have some kind of argument that that's not plausible?
Is Mason even there?
Oh, I don't know.
No, I'm still here. Sorry, my internet's a bit fluctuating. Okay. So can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree, of course, that all of that is perfectly consistent. So it is perfectly consistent to say that you hold certain values, and also like that there isn't like a kind of non-normative cause or whatever non-normative explanation for what those values are. Here's what I think they're asking in the here's what I think they're asking, and because I think this was like a bit unclear in the first conversation, but in the second conversation, here's what I think they're trying to ask. So in other words, like so let's say like your view, so you want to talk about there being like external value properties or something. And so like currently you'll say like there are these animals, and you'll say like you don't they're not valuable, and that just means like you don't perceive their value properties, or I might not be getting the view perfectly correctly. And so, but I think they want to say like, for example, imagine if like I take a human right now, and you probably will say like that human is valuable. But if I were to somehow like remove or alter the brain of the human, and now the human is brain dead, like maybe you'd say like they're no longer valuable. Would you say that, or?
Yeah, I might.
And they just want to know.
Yeah.
Okay. And so they're and all they're asking is, so given currently now, you want to say that the animals are not valuable, and then all they're asking is like, well, what would have to, if we imagine we start in a possible world where we have humans, and we can like sort of like just make
Yeah, but
slight
the only
changes
thing
to
that
that
would
possible
have to
world.
happen, the only thing that would have to happen is for the value properties to change.
Okay, but like, yeah, that's fine. But like, imagine, but like, so
But
just like, let me just sort of flesh out the story.
I don't think any non-normative facts, right, determine whether the value facts change or not. Like the value
Yeah.
facts changing is always something that's underdetermined by the normative facts. I mean, by the non-normative facts.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah. So, in other words, like, so you're saying, in other words, there is no kind of, so there's no kind of like causal or explanatory relation that goes from the non-normative facts to the
Well,
normative
wouldn't be
ones.
entailing.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
And I assume like they're also willing to agree with that as well. Hopefully.
I don't think so.
I think like so. I actually think they would if you were to ask.
You're breaking up.
Yeah, you're breaking up.
Oh, did you hear about Mason's geese attack, Jack?
No.
The last live we were in, that what happened was he was like, I think he was like in a park or something, right? And he sat on a bench. And what happened is he said that like you can hear him like yell because like a geese jumped up right beside him on the bench and was sitting next to him, right? And he was like, "Oh my God, this geese jumped up." And I said, "Yo, you gotta be careful because they be attacking people." He's like, "No, they never attack." And then he started waving his hand in front of its face. He was like, "Look how dumb it is." It's like following his hand, right? He was like mocking the goose. And literally, I'm like, "Yo, you gotta be careful." And he's like, "No, they don't do anything. They don't even got teeth." I'm like, and then I told him that my brother got attacked by one before. He's like, I don't know. And then right after that, he got attacked. And you can hear people in his background saying, "Yo, are you okay?" And Mason was like dying.
You know, that's hilarious. Geese are hilarious. I met like a flock of geese once. You know, I was staying on some farm in France when I was in college, and there was this flock of geese, and they were hilarious because if you're walking away from them, they will start to follow you and look very menacing, like they're trying to attack you. But if you like turn around and start walking towards them, they will turn around and start running away from you. But as soon as you stop and turn back, they'll and go back in the original direction you're walking, they'll turn around and start chasing you again. They're very bizarre.
Sorry, guys.
I brought this guy up.
Like...
I don't know if we want to drop this guy because I want to finish that NTT conversation.
Yeah, just kick him off. Sorry, man. But like, yeah. So I wanted to say, I think they can, and I think they would at least now agree that there isn't going to be that sort of like determined, because like obviously they're not going to want to beg the question against your view. They're not going to want to say that like the natural facts determine the normative facts or anything like that or cause them. But here's what I think you can say. If we start with like a possible world and we're just considering this possible world where humans are as they are normally, and then we start like changing that possible world, and we start changing that possible world until we gradually make it more and more similar until it eventually becomes identical to the actual world where animals are being farmed and whatnot. What they're trying to ask you is, if you kind of like think about that sequence of world alterations, they're sort of trying to ask you like, at what point would you say that it is permissible to treat the relevant beings as we like treat animals, and at what point would you say it's permissible to farm those beings?
I don't see how it's going to matter, because whatever answer I give is not going to be explained by any non-normative fact.
So I guess like about why it would matter to them. The idea is supposed to be that, so they're not really concerned about, what it's explained by. They're just concerned about what your values actually are. They're just concerned about the position itself.
But the issue was, right, why is this supposed to be a good argument, right? Like, why am I, as a non-vegan, supposed to become a vegan because of these kinds of questions, right?
Okay. Yeah, so that's so here's one thing they might say. So I don't think they're actually committed necessarily to saying that this would like motivate you to
Yeah,
become a vegan.
but that was the point of the discussion, right? The whole reason why there was a discussion was because I said, how is this a good argument, right? Now, if
Okay.
they want to just change the topic of discussion and say, well, I'm not trying to answer that question. Instead, I'm trying to get you to explain to me, what your values are. Why would I want to have that discussion?
Okay, yeah, so I see the point. So like if the idea is that like so yeah, so assume like if the topic was established as like something that would be a good argument and stuff. Oh wait, oh serious? Okay, sorry. The bus I thought was supposed to be here like just left for some reason. But it's like looks like it's a broken bus. Anyway, so yeah, if the idea of the conversation was established as like, okay, we're giving something to like motivate you to become a vegan, then I would agree. Like if they then like changed the subject and started saying something like, no, we're no longer interested in that, I would agree. Like
Well,
that's
they
just like
didn't say
going
that.
past what.
They didn't say that, but that's what you're saying that they were doing, right? Because my point was, how is this a good argument, right? And I kept saying to them, look, I don't see how it matters, what non-normative facts, if they changed, right, might coincide with a change in the evaluative facts, right? Because they're the normative facts don't explain, the non-normative facts don't explain the change in values, right? And so, since the non-normative facts don't explain it, right, then you're not, whatever it is that would be appealing to, wouldn't be offering a reason for me to change my stance on eating cows, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I think I agree. So I think like probably like given your views and other commitments, I think I would most definitely agree. Like so if they were to run this process on you, um, it probably wouldn't motivate you to change your reason anyway. And there might be a large amount of people where doing this doesn't like motivate them to change their views. But they might not always be interested in changing the views of the person they're
Oh, I
talking
grant
to.
that. I grant that.
Yeah.
But that was the point of that discussion.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. So I mean,
Yeah. So
I'm kind of done with these people.
yeah.
So I'm not going to talk to them again. But if you talk to them, it might be useful, if you don't mind, for you to explain, the issue as I've presented it.
Yeah,
You know.
I see. So like, yeah. So obviously, I agree. I agree if the point of the conversation was for them to like motivate you to a different conclusion, and they say, and let's say they agree, they're not able to do that. I agree. Yeah, they would no longer be fulfilling the point of the conversation, and I also think they would probably agree with that. I think if I were to get PKD and Terminus here right now, and I were to ask them, hey, like, look, you guys understand if this is the point of the conversation to like motivate a particular person a certain way, and you've already agreed that you aren't able to do that, then you're not fulfilling like the goals stated in the conversation. I think they would agree as well, which is why what I think is happening is like there are like different perceptions about like what the point of the discussion was. I don't think they necessarily thought the point was like established clearly to like motivate you.
Well, I mean, it was clearly stated.
Okay.
But if you do talk to them, let me know if
Yeah.
you make any progress in explaining that.
And then I also wanted to figure out like so, but at least on their end, like, but you would agree that like so I guess like when they're talking about when they're framing it as like sort of like what kind of like changes in value properties are associated with like changes in like non-normative properties or something. So like when they frame the question that way, you wouldn't say like they're like because like I agree if they're asking what causes the value properties, that's like an illegitimate question. If they're asking for a further justification, that might be an illegitimate question. But when it's framed that way, it would no longer be like a kind of illegitimate question. It's like a substantive question, but it's just not interesting, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, I mean, because the idea, here's an interesting way to think about it. You're familiar with Singer's argument about the shoes.
Yeah. Oh, the shoes. Okay.
The shoes, right?
Yeah.
So, see, the interesting thing about the shoes is, well, first of all, there's lots of assumptions in the background that can be given up that are going to make that argument not be a good argument, if it's even a good one with those in the background. So like things like, that there's that preference ordering is transitive, right? I don't see why we should accept that, right? For example, another thing is, I don't see why we have to assume. It seems like the argument presupposes some kind of generalism, right?
Yeah.
And I don't see why we should have to accept that. But here's another problem with the argument, right? You can go, if you decided you wanted to bring your preferences in some kind of consistency, into some kind of consistency, right? You can go the other direction.
Yeah.
Right.
I think we've actually talked about this before. So like,
yeah, we probably have. Yeah.
You can get to a conclusion, and instead of like adopting the probably intended conclusion of the argument, you could say, oh, if my current preferences lead to this, then okay, I'll just like reject the conclusion, and thus I'll reject the original premises that should have led to that conclusion or something like that.
Exactly. So if you
it's
think
kind of like the one man's modus ponens
is another man's modus.
Yeah.
Exactly. So if you actually think that the non-normative facts don't determine the normative facts, right? The fact that you discover some kind of causal link between some non-normative fact and some normative fact doesn't tell you whether you, in what direction you ought to change anything, if at all, right?
Yeah. So I think we mostly agree because like,
Yeah.
so it seems like the only thing that might have been there is like, it could have been so like different ideas about what the conversation is.
Well, that's
about.
possible.
Like,
yeah, I'm not taking a stand on them having some different understanding of what was being talked about.
Yeah, because it seems like because we're both going to agree that if they frame the question as like an invertible relation that's like normatively explanatory or like causally explanatory, then the question is like illegitimate.
Right.
But if they frame it in like an association relationship, then the question is like legitimate. It's like it seems like there really isn't. So like at least on the facts of the matter, there's not like a disagreement, but there's like some broader thing about the purpose of the conversation and whether or not it's like.
Well, I mean that's one way to interpret what's happened. You might be correct. I don't know, right? I don't know whether you're correct that if you go to them and say everything that I just said to you, right, that they'll accept it and be like, yeah, there's no inconsistency on that view, right? That wasn't the impression I had. But you could be could well be right about that. You could well be right about that. You could well, in which case, yeah, then if it were true, that would, in which what was really going on was that they just had a different idea about what the aim of the discussion was, and there wasn't actually a shared one, despite what they might have thought, So that might be the right hypothesis, but you can find that out.
Okay, I see. So I guess like, do you say things like, or do you think it makes sense to say that like you value certain things because certain properties? So for example, like you value humans because they're sentient. It might not be. It doesn't have to be like a general principle, but like in some cases you'll say like, well, I value this because it tastes good. I value humans because they're sentient. I value this because of that.
I think so. Yeah. I think you could say, I think sentience is like a valuable property. I think you could say that.
Okay.
I don't think that's incoherent.
And then what type of when you say stuff like that, like I value X because of Y, what type of relationship would that be? If not like so I guess it could be one like that. When you say I value X because of Y, it's like explaining one value in terms of some other value. Is that what you would say?
Yeah, I think so. Because the idea would be something like this, right? Like let's say you think a cake is desirable, right? Well, the cake can be described in terms of naturalistic facts, right? You could, or non-normative facts, or you could talk about, what it's made out of. You could even probably talk about what it tastes like, where taste like is construed non-normatively, right? Like just it's purely phenomenal
Yeah.
character, right? But really phenomenal.
Yeah.
Why is it desirable? You're really talking about another feature of about right. And so I think what you'd be saying is that something like sentience is something like that, right? Sentience can be cashed out in purely descriptive terms, right, as just like a certain set of features that are normatively neutral, right? But then above that, there's a value property, right? That's like
Okay, I see.
something like that. I think that would probably be the way to analyze it.
Yeah, because a lot of this stuff about like PKD, Terminus, and you, like a lot of this dispute, like.
I'll just like explain to them the stuff about like the discussion purpose and stuff. And
Yeah.
my expectation is like there's like agreement across the board, and there's the expectation is like there's like agreement across the board, some kind of interpretation of like what the purpose of the discussion is. My expectation is like there's just agreement across the board on all.
You could be right.
Of like what the purpose. Also, I don't know if like I don't know if like there is. Also, I want to say like with PKD and Terminus, I feel like you're not actually going. I feel like you're not with like this NTT stuff, or is it like some other stuff? Because I think like you guys will mostly agree on everything except when it comes to veganism.
Well, PKD, I thought he couldn't track, right, what was being said, and I thought he started to get kind of obnoxious because I mean you kind of know. Sorry, did I say PKD? I mean Terminus.
Okay.
Terminus couldn't. I was talking to Terminus, and I thought Terminus couldn't track. Now, it's not impossible, but I'm kind of doubtful about it.
What do you think about showing them the recording of this live?
Well, I mean, Mason is a lot more sanguine about these people being reasonable than I am, right? Because on the basis of these interactions,
because Mason basically said that maybe like Mason can talk with them, showing them the video, seeing if the disagreement or what was thought to be a disagreement was just a difference in aim in the conversation. And then if it's not, then Mason siding with you.
Yeah, you could see what happens.
All right. Well, I'm gonna end this live because I don't know what I'm gonna restart. Actually, I don't know if Mason could come back up because this live is gone. I want to restart. I want to get someone up here. We only have that one gender guy. Actually, I don't know. Maybe I should stick to this live. Sometimes resetting worsens. I don't know.